Most of the food our farmers grow ends up in the cities most of us live in. And a lot of that food ends up being waste, the sort of waste that could be composted and put back onto farms to improve the fertility of the soil. That doesn't happen as much as it should for a number of reasons. But as Chris Clark reports, little by little there is progress.
If you live in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, there's a good chance that some of this green waste came from your garden. And if you're from the western suburbs of Sydney, the contents of your green bin might end up here and be transformed into compost. Dotted around all our big cities are waste recycling centres that take the waste we produce and turn it into something useful.
In 2012, we recycled approximately 5.5 million tonne of organic material. Of that, nearly 2 million tonne was green waste, so green waste compost that's collected by local government. Food waste was only about 350,000 tonne, and that's where the opportunity lies for getting more material to process and more material out of landfill.
Recycling organic waste into compost instead of putting it in landfill cuts methane emissions, and methane's a much more serious greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. But there's another challenge the organic recycling industry wants to tackle. Most of the compost that's produced stays in our big cities. It goes back to our parks and gardens. We need to get more of it back onto farms.
We need to get people to see the benefits of recovering those waste products which come from agriculture. In other words, grow food in an agricultural environment. We take the food to the city and then the waste is then taken to landfill. We need to take it back to the soil. We need to reinvigorate the soil in farms using that organic material.
Brendan Birmingham's a dairy farmer in Victoria's Gippsland. Dairy farming's all about grass in and milk out. The quality and quantity of feed is critical, and dairy farmers can quickly tell by the volume in the vat whether what they're doing is working.
We're milking 240 cows here, Holstein cows on about 60 hectares. We were always predominantly spring calving with a slightly higher stocking rate, and we sort of got a bit of a shift to autumn calving, reducing the stocking rate a little bit more, chasing a slightly higher milk price, and farm to be just as profitable off less cows.
To do that, Brendan Birmingham's made some big changes. He's moved from perennial to annual pastures, which means he re-sows about 80% of his grazing land each year. And compost's an important ingredient.
These paddocks were sown 5 weeks ago. They've had 5 tonne of compost at sowing and 3 tonne of lime. This was all power harrowed in and then direct drilled.
He times his sowing to provide maximum feed for his cows when the milk price is at its highest.
By sowing annuals each year, it saved us a lot in water. It gives us bulk and quality from mid-autumn right through until late spring, which are the critical months.
Across his farm, Brendan Birmingham set up 14 commercial trial plots with different combinations of fertiliser and compost to work out what's best. This is year 2 of the 3-year trial, but he thinks he can already see improvements in soil structure. After decades of grazing perennial pastures, his soils typically were heavily compacted. The compost encourages all sorts of good microbes in the soil, which in turn provide the sort of environment earthworms like.
This is typical of what we'd find.
A few worms and so forth.
The organic matter in the compost works into the soil.
And that's pretty important when you're trying to grow pasture in the way you're trying to do it.
Yeah, you need quick establishment. We need those roots to get down, get established.
Dairy cattle are eating machines, and milk production is closely linked to the quantity and quality of pasture. Trial results so far suggest the compost is helping to grow a lot more grass.
All the compost plots, as against current practice, are growing about 24% more over the 7-month period of the annuals, and up to 31% on the heavier plots.
And this is where Brendan Birmingham's compost comes from. This composting operation is run by Gippsland Water, the local water authority. And what goes into their compost might surprise you. The bulk of it's green waste, and the first task is to decontaminate it. An awful lot of things that aren't green at all end up in green waste bins, mainly plastics, and they have to be picked out by hand before any processing can start.
The big challenge worldwide with the amount of contamination that goes into green waste bins, ideally we stop it at the source, and I guess the way to do that is with awareness and people understanding where their green waste ends up. But we put in a lot of effort here to decontaminate it because it does have an impact on the final product when we have plastic in the compost.
Green waste can be shredded and composted in the open air, but some other wastes have to be handled under stricter rules. They can recycle all sorts of industrial and food wastes here.
We take a range of food waste here. Only recently we had a tanker full of chocolate, which was unloaded here after a factory in Melbourne spoiled. We've also had a truck full of pizza toppings arrive, and included pickled onions and so on, so all we needed was bacon and we would have had the full show.
Oily water, other solutions and the like go into these settling tanks. The water can be drawn off and cleaned elsewhere. The solids can go into the compost mix. Some other wastes need to be combined first for easier handling.
In this case we've got a batch of spoiled or out-of-spec eggs. The waste here is fairly liquid and fairly soft, so what we're doing is putting it in the mixing pit, and we'll mix it with green waste or sawdust or some other organics to make it spadable. And then we're able to scoop it out and put it in the composting process. And in this case, being a prescribed waste, we'll put it in vessels to pasteurise for 3 days.
Prescribed wastes are pasteurised in covered vessels to kill pathogens.
We compost a range of prescribed wastes. The majority of our waste is grease trap and dairy waste. However, we also take contaminated soils, car wash waters and other food wastes, and that produces a very good compost once it's been pasteurised.
In fact, just about anything can be recycled.
Recently we had crude oil washing up on the local beach, and we were able to take the sand with the oil component, and we've actually put that through the vessels and pasteurised that, and now it's maturing on the hard stand. The hydrocarbons are suitable for the composting process and do produce a high nitrogen level once matured.
The other big component in the compost is biosolids. That's the solid human waste left over from the sewage treatment process. A lot of it now goes to landfill, but by including it in their compost mix, Gippsland Water's found a productive way of recycling it.
So in our final product, the green waste makes up about 70% of the content, and the remaining 30% is made up of the biosolids and also the food waste such as dairy waste and egg waste, and also oily waters and the contaminated solids that we're able to process here.
Making compost is a precise process. The material in these windrows has to be turned regularly and kept within a certain temperature range to promote the microbiology that ultimately turns it into a stable product.
So this compost has been through a 12-week cycle. It started off as a raw product and did its 4 weeks pasteurisation, and then spent 8 weeks maturing. So we've got a mature compost here that is nice and stable with very low odour, nice dark colour, and it's nice and fluffy and moist.
It's now ready for the farm, and luckily for Gippsland Water, they have their own farm enterprise on site where they've been able to test their compost over a number of years. John O'Craven manages their ag business. They run a substantial beef cattle herd and crop between 600 and 700 hectares.
So the paddock we're in at the moment, Chris, is canola. So we're growing around 150 hectares of canola as part of our rotation, which includes normal cereals, wheat, barley, triticale, and some fodder crops for hay as well.
Will all those get a compost treatment before they go in?
They will. So everything will get that 3 tonne to the hectare of compost. Basically in front of the planter, so it's spread and incorporated pre-planting.
After several years routinely spreading compost over their cropping land and pasture, John O'Craven says they're getting measurable improvements in soil composition.
What we're seeing with compost over the last couple of years is that in this paddock especially, we've been able to move our pH by nearly a point, and we've moved our organic matter by 1.5% in this paddock. So we've moved it from about 1.6 to around 3%, which is a really good achievement in a short time frame, and also in a dryland situation as well.
Just as it's taken time to refine their compost product at Gippsland Water, so the benefits of composting take time to reveal themselves.
Compost in nature is an organic, sort of slow release product. So to stop one system completely and start on a compost system, you need to transition into it slowly. But I'm hoping within 3 to 5 years that compost will meet all of my needs in cropping. And now it's essentially meeting all my needs in pasture and livestock. So there's not too many inputs going into that system at all apart from compost.
Having your own farm to use as an experiment is probably helping to sell their product to the locals. Fertiliser distributor Damien Gibson thinks so.
The main farmers utilising the product at the moment are dairy farmers. They seem to have a bit more understanding and awareness of the fertility needs, and also the kind of ability to take a few risks in their business. So for farmers around us, it's very much been the dairy market.
Even so, he sees compost complementing synthetic fertilisers, not replacing them.
The main reason probably is there's just not enough, is the actual fact. So I think integrating it as part of the farming fertiliser program is where it's going to be. So predominantly farmers are putting it on 1 to 2 times a year and then topping up with normal traditional fertilisers as feed requires. So I think that'll be where it fits in long term.
But getting more compost onto more farms has its challenges, as avocado grower Steve Marshall can attest. He grows avocados on the Mornington Peninsula, only a bit over an hour from central Melbourne. He's just doing a second application of compost and thinks it's ideal for the shallow root system of the avocado tree.
First of all, you can see it's still nice and moist in there. Oh, there we go. The avocado roots have already found it, and as I said, this has only been out maybe 10 weeks, and they've already started heading up into it. Being surface root structure, a very fine fibrous root system, they basically go hunting for where the organic material is decomposing, and that's where they're feeding.
But getting to this point has had its trials. Over the years, he's found big variations between composts, and contamination's been a problem.
One product we got once, we got a load of bricks with it as well. And we still have the bricks sitting in the orchard because no one's really got round to picking them up yet, but they're out of the way at least. Other products too can be watered during their manufacturing process. Quite saline bore waters are used, so all of a sudden you might be thinking that you're adding a really good product, but actually it's really salty, which for us with the avocados is a big no-no. But we know with this stuff that it's pretty much right.
And like most users of compost, Steve Marshall stresses it's just one ingredient in creating a healthy and productive environment for his trees.
We're talking about gains that are different to the application of commercial fertilisers. This is more about going into the soil itself and looking at, you know, the big picture, the soil microorganisms, and also the mechanisms that can help the other fertilisers that you apply being taken up and also held in the soil.
Transporting compost is expensive. Even close to Melbourne and the source of supply as these orchards are, transport costs more than the product itself. And then there's the cost of spreading it.
When it comes to spreading it, that's always been an issue too. The company that we're dealing with at the moment, they've now built their own spreader. They recognise that there was a gap between the farmers wanting to use the product and them trying to sell the product.
Increasing compost's appeal to the broader farming market is the industry's main marketing challenge.
A lot of farmers see the benefit. They know what the benefits are, but there's also a massive number of people that just don't know it. We need more of us to go out there and push this product to really get it out there. And our industry is starting to focus more on that marketing aspect. And, you know, I still think the feet on the ground with the farmer is the key.
Most agree the urban market for compost is fairly saturated. If there's to be growth, then greater use in broadacre agriculture seems a logical path. This is partly driven by necessity. State and local governments generally want to recycle more waste, including all the food waste that now goes mostly to landfill. Paul Coffey runs the Organic Recycling Association, which represents commercial composters.
Most of us now recognise that putting those materials into landfill creates methane gas, which has got 21 times the effect on the greenhouse as what carbon dioxide does. So it is a bad thing. And the whole circular economy, that is, of taking that nutrient from the soil and the biology from the soil and taking it to the city, we need to recognise that taking it back is an important part of sustainability.
Farmers will buy more if the price they pay reflects the true cost of recycling, meaning all of us must pay.
What we've done in this country is the farmers have actually lost the natural capital in their soil. The natural capital being that organic matter and being that carbon that was in their soil. To recover them means that we have to process them and then take them all the way back. And that has never ever been factored into the price of the value of a product.
Gippsland Water's found a sweet spot which allows it to recycle waste into a product that local farmers will pay for. It can be done.
Well, currently we're pushing out about 1,200 tonnes of compost per week, and that's going straight to farms. We see over the next 12 to 24 months that we could double our production, and all of that will be used by farmers. So we think that there's a pretty bright future in our compost.
It's giving people like Brendan Birmingham greater choice about how they run their farms.
We're getting paid a higher price for our milk with more autumn milk, more off-season milk, and being able to sustain production much better through the autumn and winter months due to having more high-quality pasture in front of us.